She survived combat zones overseas only to have a gun pulled on her at her own son's funeral by an American cop. It was a heavy gray morning in Arlington. Not the kind of gray that made you want to stay in bed, but the kind that pressed down on your chest and made you feel like the sky itself was mourning. General Monica Elaine Triggs had buried soldiers before, too many. She had written the letters, folded the flags, stood at attention through the gun salutes, but this time the casket held her son. Staff Sergeant Isaiah Triggs, 29 years old, killed during a routine patrol in Kandahar after an IED struck his convoy. She wore her full uniform, not because she had to, but because Isaiah had always said, "When I go, I want my mom standing tall in her stars." And so she did. The deep navy jacket, the medals lined like history across her chest, her hat perfectly creased. She looked unbreakable from the outside, but inside her heart felt like it was disintegrating piece by piece. The family arrived in a long black SUV. Monica sat between her sister, Vivian, and Isaiah's godfather, Command Sergeant Major Delroy Hunt, who had served with Monica back in Mosul. Her hands trembled as she held a folded program with Isaiah's photo on the front, a still frame of her baby boy grinning in his fatigues. It didn't feel real. As they pulled up near Section 60, the place reserved for the newest war dead, Monica could already hear the solemn notes of the military band warming up. A row of soldiers stood stiff along the path, rifles angled down in front of them. It was the kind of organized pain that only the military knew how to deliver with precision. "I don't think I can do this," Monica whispered, staring straight ahead. Her voice was flat, not panicked, not crying, just drained. "You've done harder," Delroy murmured, squeezing her hand. "But I know this ain't right." The door opened and Monica stepped out into the open air, her heels clicking against the pavement. Her uniform caught the eye of almost everyone nearby. A few saluted as she passed. Some whispered her name. She was recognizable, the first black woman to reach 4 stars in the Army, a public figure in military circles. But none of that mattered today. She was just a mother walking toward the worst moment of her life. She took a deep breath and looked ahead, only for her eyes to fall on a police officer pacing near the parked vehicles. His patrol car was idling, parked slightly crooked on the curb. He wore mirrored sunglasses despite the cloud cover, and his hand kept drifting near his holster. That was the first moment her stomach tensed. Officer Brent Delaney wasn't supposed to be there for security. He was just local traffic detail, called in by the city because of the expected turnout, but no one had briefed him on who was attending. He turned toward her, his brows dropping beneath the edge of his sunglasses. "Hey," he barked suddenly. "Ma'am, can I see some ID?" Monica blinked. She paused, thinking maybe he was talking to someone else. "I'm speaking to you, ma'am," he said, louder, walking toward her, his hand now fully resting on his weapon. "I'm General Monica Triggs," she said calmly, slowly raising her hand toward her coat pocket. "I'm here for my son's funeral. That's my family over there." "I said stop right there," Delaney shouted, this time pulling his weapon from the holster. Gasps rang out from nearby. A child screamed. Monica froze in place, both hands raised in the air. "I'm not armed," she said slowly, keeping her voice even. "This is my dress uniform. You're making a mistake." But Delaney didn't move. His gun was aimed at her chest, his finger on the trigger. The funeral had come to a complete halt. "Drop to the ground," Officer Brent Delaney barked. General Monica Triggs didn't move. She didn't flinch, didn't blink. But inside, her brain was screaming. She had spent over 30 years training soldiers on how to survive threats like this, but in all her tours, in all her battles, she never imagined she'd be on the receiving end of a loaded gun at her own son's funeral. "I'm unarmed," she repeated, louder this time. "I'm a United States Army general. You're pointing a weapon at a mother on the worst day of her life." "I don't care what kind of costume you're wearing," Delaney snapped. "I said get on the ground before I drop you." Delroy, Isaiah's godfather, stepped forward fast. "Sir, that's General Monica Triggs. You're about to make the worst mistake of your life. Put the weapon down." "Back off," Delaney screamed, swinging the gun toward Delroy. Several attendees gasped. A soldier on the honor detail took one step forward, but a superior officer motioned for him to stay still. Nobody wanted to escalate it further, but no one could believe what they were watching. The gun hadn't just been pulled, it was steady. Delaney was ready. Vivian, Monica's sister, was crying now. "This can't be happening," she whispered. "Monica, don't move. Please don't move." Monica stayed locked in place, hands still raised. Her heart was pounding, but her voice stayed calm. "Officer, I'm going to open my coat pocket and take out my military ID slowly. You reach, I shoot," he said without hesitation. A soft shuffle of feet could be heard around them. Mourners were pulling children back, whispering to one another. Two women who had served with Monica were already recording with their phones. That's when one of the honor guard soldiers made a call over the radio. "We need an immediate supervisor at Section 60, armed officer threatening a civilian, possibly racial profiling, urgent." But that help wasn't there yet. Delaney kept his weapon trained on Monica. "Turn around," he growled. "On your knees, hands on your head." Monica closed her eyes for half a second. She had faced live gunfire. She had walked through bomb zones. She had lost friends, soldiers, and now her only child. But this was the moment that nearly broke her. Still, she slowly lowered herself to the ground, not because she was afraid, not because she thought she was guilty, but because the last thing she wanted was for someone else to get hurt. From the crowd, an older veteran in a wheelchair shouted, "What the hell is wrong with you?" "That's General Triggs." Delaney didn't respond. He was locked in his own world, tunnel vision, his lip curled, his hand steady. "Somebody tackle that man," someone yelled from the crowd, but Monica raised her hand just slightly, enough to signal no. She didn't want it to turn into a bloodbath. That's when a different officer came running down the road. Lieutenant Serena Keogh, who had been coordinating traffic near the entrance gate, saw the scene from 40 yards out and sprinted full speed toward them. "Delaney, holster your weapon now," she shouted. Delaney didn't move. "I said holster it. That's General Triggs." Keogh was almost in his face now, but he still didn't lower the gun. So Keogh shoved his arm upward with both hands and knocked the weapon clean out of his grip. It clattered onto the pavement. Delaney staggered back, confused, flustered, then reached for it again. Keogh grabbed his arm and twisted it behind his back. "You're done. You're done," she said through her teeth. Two nearby officers helped restrain him, finally dragging him off to the side. Monica was still kneeling, both hands on her head. Someone rushed to her, Sergeant Diane Knowles, who had served under Monica during a deployment in Romania. She helped her up gently. "Ma'am, it's okay now. We've got you." Monica stood slowly. Her knees felt like they were made of stone. She looked around at the sea of stunned faces, the silence, the tears, the children clinging to their parents, the casket still waiting to be lowered. Her son's final moment, destroyed. But if she thought the worst was over, she had no idea how big the story was about to get. Phones were out, cameras were rolling. The moment Officer Brent Delaney had pointed a gun at General Monica Triggs was already on its way to becoming national news, and it hadn't even been an hour. The funeral was supposed to start at 10 in the morning. By 6 minutes past, the cemetery was flooded with law enforcement, military personnel, and reporters rushing past security gates. But the crowd, they weren't just spectators. These were people who had come to bury a soldier, friends of Isaiah, fellow troops, families, black, white, Latino, Asian, it didn't matter. They had seen something that didn't just break the moment, it shattered something deeper. Nobody could get the image out of their head. A mother in uniform kneeling on the ground while a police officer aimed a loaded gun at her face. Monica was helped into a nearby tent for privacy. Her hands trembled as she tried to remove her hat. She couldn't, not yet. Her body was stuck in survival mode. Delroy stood at her side the entire time, silent. He'd seen combat, he'd seen death, but this, he looked like he couldn't breathe. Outside the tent, Sergeant Knowles was arguing with two Arlington PD officers. He shouldn't have been out here alone. He had no idea who he was dealing with. He wasn't assigned to inner perimeter, one officer replied defensively. He was just backup, overflow traffic. Well, your overflow traffic just threatened to kill a grieving mother at her own son's funeral, Knowles snapped. You think that excuse is going to fly on national TV? Meanwhile, Officer Delaney sat in the back of a squad car, handcuffed in front of him. His face was blank, cold. Not once did he ask if Monica was okay. Not once did he ask if her son was really being buried that day. The only thing he kept muttering was that she wasn't acting right, that she didn't look like she belonged. Back inside the tent, Monica finally broke her silence. "He saw my skin before he saw my stars," she whispered. Delroy lowered his head. "I survived war zones," she continued. "I've walked through sandstorms, led troops into burning villages. I've been targeted by enemies overseas, and still the only time I've ever had a gun in my face on American soil was by a cop at Isaiah's funeral." Vivian reached for her hand. "He didn't break you, Monica." But Monica shook her head slowly. "He didn't need to. He broke this day. This was supposed to be Isaiah's. Now it'll always be about him." Outside, people were gathering around officers. A young woman named Brandy, who'd served with Isaiah in Germany, was already on a livestream. "This is what we deal with. You could be a general, a mother in uniform at your own son's funeral, and they still look at you like a threat, like you don't belong. I watched that man pull a gun on someone I'd take orders from without question. She wasn't dangerous. She was grieving." Within an hour, the livestream hit 2.3 million views. By lunchtime, a dozen national outlets were requesting statements from the Department of Defense, the Arlington Police Department, and Monica herself. But Monica wasn't ready to speak. The funeral resumed nearly 2 hours late. No speeches, no taps, no three-volley salute, just a quiet burial, just pain. Isaiah's casket was lowered into the ground in silence. Monica placed her hand gently on the polished wood and whispered something only she and her son would ever know. Then she stood up and walked away. The reporters were waiting by the gate, but she didn't stop. The army doesn't train you to grieve in public. It trains you to move, to keep going, even when it burns, even when your heart is full of glass. But that silence wouldn't last long, because the world was about to explode. By 3 in the afternoon, General Triggs's name was trending in every major city across the country. "Justice for General Triggs. As she served, honor her." Clips from the funeral had flooded social media like a tidal wave. One from a teenager who had been filming with his phone across the parking lot had captured the entire standoff in shaky but undeniable detail. Monica, hands up, the gun pointed inches from her chest, a voice screaming, "I said get on the ground." You couldn't argue with it. You couldn't spin it. And people didn't want spin. They wanted answers. The first public statement came from Arlington PD, posted to a sterile white background on their social media page. "We are aware of an incident involving one of our officers at Arlington National Cemetery. An investigation is underway. The officer in question has been placed on administrative leave pending review." That was it. No apology, no acknowledgement of who Monica was, and definitely no mention of a gun being pointed at the face of a grieving mother in uniform. It backfired instantly. Within minutes, prominent figures were tearing into it. Senator Lyle Bowers tweeted that a 4-star general attending her son's funeral had a weapon pulled on her in full uniform, and that calling it an incident wasn't just disrespectful, it was a disgrace. Retired General Teresa Randall, one of Monica's close peers, went live on CNN that evening, her voice cracking as she spoke. She said she had trained with Monica, that they had done 2 tours together, that Monica was the reason she stayed in the service, and now she had to sit there and explain to the American public that one of their own was treated like a criminal in front of her son's casket. That, she said, wasn't a mistake. It was a reflection. By nightfall, protesters had gathered outside the Arlington PD building. They weren't loud, they weren't throwing anything. They just stood in silence, many in uniform, holding signs with one message: "She served, he pulled a gun." Monica still hadn't spoken publicly. She stayed inside her sister's home in Prince George's County, away from the flashing lights and microphones. But that didn't stop people from showing up. Banners were draped on the fence outside her home. Letters poured in from every state. One from a Gold Star mother in Kansas said she had buried her son too, and couldn't imagine being made to feel like a threat on that day, and was sorry the uniform didn't protect Monica like it was supposed to. Vivian kept bringing the letters into the house in shoeboxes. They ran out of room by the 3rd day. Delroy stayed nearby. He barely said anything, but he made sure Monica ate, made sure she rested even when sleep wouldn't come. On the 4th day, Monica finally spoke. Not to a camera, not to a reporter, but to a room full of military families at a private gathering in Washington. No cameras, no press, but someone recorded it anyway. "I didn't cry when he died," Monica said quietly. "I didn't cry when I got the call from the Pentagon. I didn't even cry at the airport when they handed me his remains. But I cried when that officer aimed a gun at me. Not because I was scared for my life, but because I realized the uniform I had given everything to didn't protect me from being seen as a threat." That clip, those exact words, hit harder than any statement a lawyer could draft. They were raw, real, human, and it lit a fire the city couldn't put out. Civil rights lawyers demanded action. The Department of Justice opened a federal investigation. The governor of Maryland issued a statement calling the incident a grotesque betrayal of public service and decency. And meanwhile, Officer Brent Delaney was still silent. His union had refused to comment. His lawyer had turned down interviews. But the public was done waiting, and the courtroom was about to become the nation's front row seat. Courtroom 6B in the U.S. District Court in Alexandria was packed to the walls. It was 6 months after the funeral. The press had been lined up since 5 in the morning. Military personnel showed up in full dress uniforms. Veterans filled entire rows. The Triggs family sat quietly near the front, flanked by Monica's legal team and a few close friends. She wore civilian clothes, simple and clean, no ribbons, no stars, just Monica. Brent Delaney entered in a gray suit, no badge, no tie, just the weight of the entire country on his shoulders. And somehow he still didn't look sorry. His attorney, Mark Holstead, went with the usual playbook. His client was acting in the line of duty, responding to what he perceived as a threat, with no intent to cause harm. But that line only got him so far, because the jury wasn't just hearing arguments. They were watching the footage. The courtroom dimmed as the screen lit up with the raw video. You could hear the wind that morning, the faint sound of heels on pavement. Then Delaney's voice. "Put your hands where I can see them." The room tensed. Some wiped tears. Others looked away. There she was, Monica Triggs, standing tall in her full military uniform, hands raised, calm as a person could possibly be in that moment. And yet he never lowered the gun. When the lights came back on, no one said a word. Then came the witness testimony. First up, Lieutenant Serena Keogh, the officer who stopped Delaney that day. She didn't hold back. He refused to listen. "Even after I identified General Triggs, he was locked in, aggressive. I had to physically knock the weapon from his hands." Delaney's attorney tried to cast doubt on her use of force. "You're saying you escalated by laying hands on a fellow officer?" "I stopped him from shooting an unarmed, grieving mother," Keogh snapped. "Call it what you want." Then came Delroy. He walked slowly to the stand, paused, and spoke in a low voice that filled the room without needing a mic. "I've seen enemy fire. I have lost good men to chaos. But I've never felt more helpless than that moment, watching someone point a gun at Monica. She didn't panic. She didn't shout. She stood there like the damn soldier she is. And he looked at her like she was nothing." Then came the bombshell. Internal Affairs records. The prosecutor revealed that Brent Delaney had 9 previous complaints for excessive force. 3 were dismissed, 6 were inconclusive, but 1 was nearly identical, a black Army Reserve captain in El Paso, pulled over in uniform, forced out of his car, held at gunpoint. No charges, just miscommunication. That's when the courtroom started to shift, because this wasn't a one-time mistake. This was a pattern. The prosecution showed a photo of Isaiah Triggs on the screen, smiling, in uniform, a bronze star pinned to his chest. General Triggs came to bury her only child, the prosecutor said. She had every reason to expect honor, respect, dignity. Instead, she faced what no mother, no officer, no human being should ever face. A weapon aimed at her heart, not for what she did, but for what he saw when he looked at her. In the gallery, people cried openly. Monica didn't flinch. Her hands were folded tightly in her lap. Then it was her turn to speak. She stood in front of the jury, not to rage, not to beg, but to tell the truth. "I didn't come here for revenge," she said. "I came here for accountability. I don't want to see another soldier's mother kneel in fear. I don't want another officer excused for seeing danger where there is none." She paused, locking eyes with Delaney. "I'm not a symbol. I'm a mother. and my son never got the funeral he deserved because of you." Delaney looked down. For the first time in the entire trial, he looked like he might actually feel something. The jury deliberated for 4 hours. The verdict: guilty on all counts, aggravated assault with a deadly weapon, civil rights violation under color of law, abuse of authority. The judge didn't hesitate. "Brent Delaney, you are hereby sentenced to life in federal prison without the possibility of parole." There was no applause, just silence, heavy, sharp. Then the judge looked at Monica. "I hope this courtroom sends a message, not just to law enforcement but to the country." But for Monica, the real message wasn't in the verdict. It was in what she said next. After the verdict, reporters rushed to the courthouse steps. Microphones hovered like flies. The questions came rapid, sharp, and loud. "General Triggs, how do you feel about the sentence? Do you believe justice was served? Will you be pressing charges against the department?" Monica didn't answer at first. She stood on the steps in the cool air, surrounded by people but feeling alone. She glanced up. Gray clouds again, just like the day of the funeral, just like the moment it all started. Vivian stood beside her, Delroy too. Finally, Monica stepped forward. "I didn't come here for revenge," she began. "I came here so that no one would ever forget what happened when a mother in uniform was treated like a criminal for mourning her son." A hush fell over the crowd. Isaiah died believing in this country, believing in service, believing in sacrifice. What happened at his funeral was not just a mistake. It was a failure of training, a failure of judgment, a failure of heart. She took a breath, steadying herself. "Let me be clear. This isn't about one bad officer. This is about the system that allowed him to keep his badge after 9 complaints. This is about the silence that follows injustice when the cameras turn off." She looked out over the sea of reporters, her voice even, sharp. "You don't have to wear a uniform to be worthy of respect. You don't have to bury a child to deserve to grieve in peace. But if someone like me, someone with rank, with medals, with years of service, can be treated like a threat, then what does that mean for everyone else who doesn't have a uniform to shield them?" She paused. "This isn't just my story. This is America's mirror, and it's time we stop pretending we don't recognize the reflection." That clip was played for weeks. It aired on every major network. It was taught in classrooms. It was cited during hearings on police reform. But Monica didn't care about the spotlight. She went home. She visited Isaiah's grave quietly on a Monday morning before the gates were even open to the public. She brought one folding chair and one sunflower, his favorite flower. Not many people knew that. She sat for nearly an hour, said nothing, just listened. The wind, the rustling grass, the silence of a son now gone. Before she left, she knelt and pressed her palm to the cool stone. Whispered again like she had that day 6 months before, "I did what I had to do." And she stood up, not because she was healed, not because she was whole, but because that's what strength looks like when the world is still watching. Because this story isn't just about pain. It's about standing up in the middle of it and speaking.